I just want to say to you this morning before I read this verse, you ready for this? I want to say to you, if you're dealing with fear today, anxiety, fear about the future, you're afraid of what's going to happen, fear over finances, fear over your physical health and well-being, fear over your kids, fear over your marriage, fear over any area of your life, fear over your own safety, I want to say to you today that it's time we deal with this and you not stay bound by these things any longer. That God promises us you can be free from fear. And when you're free from fear, let me tell you, it's like taking a fresh breath of air in the springtime. It's like filling your lungs with fresh air. You're free. Amen? Let's read this passage of Scripture, then we'll pray. Matthew chapter 14. This is when Jesus told the disciples to go out on the water to cross the Sea of Galilee. Now, on the fourth watch of the night, that's somewhere between 4 and 6 o'clock in the morning, Jesus went to them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "It is a ghost." And they cried out for fear. See that? They cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid." When we get to the latter half of this message, you'll see we're going to focus on these three things as the keys to overcoming fear. Be of good cheer, 1. 2, it is I. 3, do not be afraid. And Peter answered him and said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." So he said, "Come." And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him, and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for your anointing upon me to speak your word. God, thank you for opening the ears of the people to hear today. God, may there be an explosion of revelation in people's minds and hearts, that fear may be dispelled today in people's lives. And we give you all the glory for this in Jesus' name. And everybody shout amen. 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 Look, before you see it, give somebody a big hug. Come on. Are you all ready? Stay hooked in with me on this. Listen to this. In this passage in Matthew 14, as I said, Jesus told them to cross the Sea of Galilee in a boat. It was evening time. They're there half the night, most of the nights, between 4 and 6 in the morning. They're stuck because of the storm. And Jesus comes walking on the water, and the disciples cry out. They're full of fear. When Jesus does say to Peter, "Come out and walk on the water," and Peter begins to walk, the first thing that happens when the wind begins to hit his face, it says again that he began to fear, began to be afraid, and he began to sink. And I say that because it's interesting. Watch this. It's not just one instance of fear. The disciples were basically living in an environment in their soul where there was fear pervading their lives. We see it in many other instances in the Gospels, in their journeys with Jesus. Fear was a problem in the disciples' lives, and it was keeping them from going where God wanted them to go. And I say it for this reason. Watch this. Before we get to the remedy of fear, we want to identify fear and how it is a basic human problem. And I say it because, listen to me carefully, if you don't understand it's a basic human problem, then you're going to think that there's something uniquely wrong with you that you can't fix. And you can fix it. Now, I'm going to tell you this. It's going to take Jesus to help you fix it. You can't fix it yourself, but it can be fixed and you can be free. To do that, you've got to understand what fear is. What is fear in the first place, and how does it work? Well, first of all, now listen to me carefully. Fear is a basic human emotion. In other words, there are a lot of emotions that you have as a human being, but psychologists basically name 4 emotions that are fundamental emotions. The one is fear, the other one is another one anger, another one joy, and another one sadness. And they say that all the human emotions are built on those 4 emotions. So one of the fundamental human emotions is fear. You say, why would that be? Well, it's very simple if you think about it. Fear actually, in a good sense, is given to us by God to protect us from danger. It's given to protect us, to keep us safe. It's a survival instinct inside of us. You have fear And that's the reason you don't run out into the street and get hit by a car. Because there is a healthy fear. You know, that, matter of fact, if you're stepping out in the street and a car comes, fear is what makes you be able to react so fast to jump back and not be able to be hit and not be hit by the car. So fear actually is a good thing when it's a proper fear, and it's not fear that's out of control or fear that the enemy brings. Fear in the good sense works like this, and you have to understand how fear works biologically or physiologically, you know, as a survival mechanism, for you then to begin to understand how fear works in the negative sense and how we need to shut it off. Here's how fear works. That whenever a threatening thing comes at you or comes to you, there is some threat that comes. There is a little almond-shaped small structure in your brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala immediately registers that threat and releases all kinds of hormones and chemicals into your body that ultimately, not ultimately, but in an instant, in a moment's time, causes your heartbeat to speed up. It causes your breathing to breathe faster. It causes your blood pressure to go up. It even causes blood to rush to your muscle groups so that they can be stronger. And it causes your skin to begin to sweat. Why does your skin sweat? Because it's like a radiator system, a coolant system. Because of your body doing all this extra work, it needs to be cooled down, and so your body automatically sweats to cool itself down. Isn't that interesting? That's the way that God has made us, and that comes out of the amygdala. Now, it's interesting the way this happens, because what else the amygdala does is whenever that threat comes, let's say you have a car accident, and you have a pretty serious car accident, and when that happens, your amygdala, as soon as the threat came, even before you hit something or something hits you, immediately all these things took place that I just mentioned. Your pupils dilate, your blood pressure is up, your muscles are flooded with oxygen and blood. It's all happening. You're ready for action. And so the amygdala did all that. But what else it did is when that accident happened, your amygdala registered that in its memory, and your amygdala remembers that. And therefore, that's why a person who has a serious accident, the next time they get in the car and get out on the road on the highway, immediately their blood pressure goes up, and their pupils dilate, their breathing becomes rapid. How many of y'all know what I'm talking about? There is a fear that is gripping them because the amygdala is registering that there is a threat. Before we get to that, those perceived threats, let me just say this. You know, let me tell you a funny little story that when I was a little kid, I don't know how old I was, maybe it was about 9 or 10 years old. I lived in South St. Louis. I had a bicycle. I ran all over South St. Louis. There's no place I didn't ride in South St. Louis as a kid. I love South St. Louis, by the way. Maybe it's the greatest place in the world. And we have any South St. Louisans here, huh? Thank you. 5 of you. All right. Thank you. All right. There you go. But they're excited about it. Now, one year for Christmas, my mom and dad bought me a bicycle, and I was so excited about it. This bicycle was what they called a Stingray. It was a new kind of bicycle. Now, does anybody remember a Stingray, what that is, a Stingray bicycle? Oh, if you do, man, there's nothing like it. And two things identified a Stingray bicycle. One is it had a long seat called a banana seat, and the other is it had big high handlebars like chopper handlebars. It was cool as could be. The only thing is it wasn't made for speed. And so anyway, it just wasn't. So one day, I was down off of Grand on Lafayette Avenue, right in front of where Incarnate Word Hospital. How many of y'all remember Incarnate Word Hospital? Come on, some of you will. Not many of you, all right. Anyway, well, I was driving right past there and on my little Stingray, and here were these, I saw about 8 or 10 boys, big teenage boys. I must have been about 10 or 11, something like that. And they were all on 10 speeds. And I know 10 speeds ain't nothing today, but man, they were the big deal then. They were made for speed. And here I was on my little Stingray that wasn't made for speed, and I had a little chubby body back then, and I wasn't made for speed either. And so anyway, I looked at them, and they lined up across the street, got off their bikes, standing there in a menacing fashion. I knew exactly what they wanted to do. They were waiting for me. I was coming toward them. They were going to steal my bike. I don't know what happened next except to say this. Something happened in my amygdala. And all of a sudden, my pupils dilated and blood and oxygen flooded to my muscle groups. And I didn't even think to do this. I was afraid. I should have took off and run. But I stepped on those pedals, and I ran toward those guys. And those guys moved to those bicycles just before I hit them. I busted through them, and they were so mad that all I heard behind me when I busted through was, "Let's get him." And I looked behind me, and they're all getting on their bicycles and running after me. I didn't think a thought. This is one thing that fear does. You can't even think about anything else. I didn't think a thought, but all I know is that I went on a few blocks, and I thought, well, they haven't caught me yet. What's going on? And I looked down at my feet, and they looked like a fan on high speed. I couldn't even see my feet. It looked like the road runner chasing the Wile E. Coyote. You know, and so I went for blocks and blocks, and they never did catch me. And I finally looked back behind me, and there was no one there. I fell over exhausted. What had happened? I didn't have the strength to do that, but I outran those boys on my little Stingray bike because of fear. So you see, fear is a very powerful thing when it comes to a real threat. But the problem comes in our lives today when so many threats we have are not like bears and lions and 10 guys chasing us or some kind of enemy tribe where that you need to prepare yourself for fight or flight. But they are perceived threats. So much of our threats are things that we perceive. They're not real. In other words, let me give you an example. Listen to this. Whenever we take and we hear all this stuff that's happening in the world today that's negative, there's really nothing we can do about it, is there? But yet something happens on the inside of us where we feel threatened. We feel threatened about the economy. We feel, even you hear about somebody getting shot and killed somewhere else across the United States. Somehow inside of you, that makes you feel threatened. There are all of these perceived threats. You listen to me? Either just perceived threats, or maybe they are real threats, but they're out there in some vague arena where we can't do anything about them. And so what happens is this. What's very interesting is that whether it's a real threat or a perceived threat, your body doesn't know the difference. It can't distinguish between real or perceived threats, so it reacts the same. When your body, when you are facing, when there's a perceived threat, something you think bad's going to happen, it's not even really there. You're just afraid of something that's going to happen. It's not really going to happen. Do you know that your body reacts and responds just as if that threat was real? And the problem is because it's not real, then what happens is all these hormones, all these chemicals, all this stuff that's released inside of us because of the fear, instead of being released out of us through fighting against an enemy, it literally begins to burn us up on the inside. It begins to eat us alive. That's why we have ulcers. That's why we have heart disease many times. That's why we have so many problems, digestive problems, so many other things. Have y'all listen to what I'm talking about here today? Fear is just a plain enemy of your soul. And so I want to say it again because that's one of my most important points you need to understand in overcoming fear, is that when your mind is telling your body there's a threat, your body doesn't distinguish between real or perceived threats. It reacts the same way. So let's talk about our fears for a moment. I want you to break down fears in two arenas. Are you ready? Watch this. One arena is this. They're called phobias. Phobias are things like fear of water. Some people are afraid of water. Some are afraid of heights. Some are afraid of closed spaces. Some are afraid of the dark. Spiders. Many people are, one of the most widespread fear phobias is the fear of public speaking. Isn't that interesting? The fear of flying, the fear of being alone, the fear of being in crowds, and the fear of blood. Now, I got to tell you, I have three of those that actually I've had to struggle with and to conquer in my life. And one is the fear of heights. And I came by that honestly. My dad did not like heights at all. He was a brave man, but he didn't like heights. Another one for me was the fear of blood. Another one is the fear of closed spaces. You know, blood. I mean, my wife can watch those, you know, what are those shows where they dissect things, you know, and, you know, forensic things, you know, and blood everywhere. And she acts like it's exciting. And if I watch any of that, it's like my stomach starts turning and I want to release my dinner. And it's just a problem. I don't know why. So watch this. On one side, there are phobias. Now look at this. Everything else, now you got to get this. Everything else that's not a phobia, I would like for you to categorize under the word anxieties. Anxieties. All the rest of them are anxieties. Why do I want you to do that? It's for this reason. And there is a real fear when you have a real enemy. But when the threats are perceived, all of those perceived threats are things that make you anxious. In other words, a phobia is something that is a specific, real. It's a thing or it's an event or something else that you look at and say that. But anxiety is this general, vague, long-abiding fear inside of you that something in general is going to happen. It could be one of many things. Let me give you some examples. Fear of disease or infirmity. It's not like some phobia, specific things, but just in general, afraid that you're going to get sick or have a disease or a tumor or something and going to die. That's anxiety. Fear of old age. That's anxiety. Loneliness. People have an anxiety, a fear of loneliness, that I'm going to be alone, that I'm not going to have anybody, that I'm going to be unhappy because I'm going to be lonely. That's an anxiety. Now watch this. Fear of being victimized. There's a fear of betrayal and rejection. There's this, that's an anxiety. You know, and this anxiety, watch this, it's a perceived threat. What do I mean by that? You say, well, look, I've been betrayed. That's not perceived. Here's what I mean. Watch this. Let's say someone could be married to a person and they're abusive and misuse this person and just really abuse them terribly. And so they're divorced from that person. Now they're in a new relationship, a new marriage. And so let's say this woman, say it's a woman that marries this man. Her husband abused her before. So watch this. The amygdala registered that threat. There was a real threat with her husband. But then also what it did is it created a memory of that threat. And so when it comes into this new marriage, when this new husband says something that he doesn't even know, it was the same type of thing that old husband used to say just before he abused her. And all of a sudden the amygdala goes into action and it has memorized that as a threat. And this new husband may be loving and not a threat at all, but she perceives him as a threat because the amygdala has released fear in her because of that memory. Y'all out there today? And so as a result, it's not a real threat, but we perceive it as a threat. That's an anxiety. This person lives with this abiding anxiety. There's some other anxieties I want to mention. One is the anxiety that is a fear of lack or poverty. Now listen to me when I'm talking to you today. There are many people, I know there are people in this place right now, that you're living right now with a fear of lack or poverty. Maybe you're being provided for now and you're making it okay, but there's this fear that somewhere down the line, you're going to not be able to be provided for or to provide. Now listen to me. You know what you're doing whenever you live that way? Look, if the day did come, somewhere down the road, where I wasn't going to be able to be provided for, when that happens, I will experience the negative effects and activations that happen as a result of that. But what I'm doing, that's probably never going to happen. Y'all agree with that? How many people do you know that's happened to? I mean, people make it somehow. But what I'm doing by fearing that lack in the future and that poverty not being taken care of, you ready for this? I'm living every single day as if it was happening today. It's the most insane thing in the world, because when I'm living with that fear of not being provided for, or I'm living with that fear of being lonely or alone, or I'm living with that fear of disease and infirmity, what's happening is I am repeatedly, listen to this, I am repeatedly re-experiencing failure in advance. Listen, I'm going to say it again. I am repeatedly, is anybody out there? Y'all listen to me over here, huh? Listen, I am repeatedly re-experiencing failure every day in advance. In other words, my body is acting just like it was happening today. And how many of y'all agree that can't be healthy at all? Fear is an enemy of your soul. Let's move on. Watch this. Look at this. What Paul says in Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 8. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to all men. The Lord is at hand. Be anxious for nothing. I want us to get that. Say it loud and strong. Be anxious for nothing. Come on, look at the person. Tell them this. Tell them this. Say, be anxious for nothing. Say it. Say nothing. I love that unqualified statement. Be anxious for nothing. But in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Isn't that powerful? Now listen to this before we go to the remedy. The way anxiety functions that's different than phobias is that phobias come just at the moment that you are faced with that particular thing. Fear of water, it's only when you get near water, right? Fear of heights, it's only when you get up on a ladder or someplace that's high. Anxiety is not like that. Now get this, because anxiety is the one that we're having a problem with today in our society. Our society is filled completely with anxious people. Anxiety is destroying us. As a culture, as a nation, we're becoming a terribly medicated society because anxiety is eating us alive. And here's the way anxiety is different than phobias. Anxiety doesn't just come whenever you face the thing, like phobia does. Anxiety is a low, abiding, simmering fear that's there all the time. It's like taking a burner on a stove and turning it on low, and it just burns all the time, and at certain points it flares up hotter, but it's just burning at a low grade all the time. And if we compound our anxieties, like fear of lack and poverty, with fear of disease, and combine that with fear of being lonely, and fear of all these other things, we combine them, then that effect is compounded in us, and then people ultimately many times become overcome with anxiety, and they begin to have anxiety attacks. That happened to me. Many of you know my story, where for 5 years I was plagued with anxiety attacks. And I think one of the main reasons I couldn't resolve it in over 5 years was because for a long time I did not recognize it as something that could be fixed. Or I didn't call it fear what it was. It's just raw fear, but it's an abiding, low-grade fear that exists all the time. Now, can I ask you a question all over this place? How many of you, be honest with me, how many of you relate to that kind of thing? Right? Lift up your hand. Come on. All over the place. Oh, there's more than that. Some of y'all lying to me. How many of you know what I'm talking about, huh? Of course you do. So many of you do. Now, I want to help you get rid of that. How are you going to get rid of that? Here's how you're going to get rid of it. You're going to take Jesus' words to the disciples. You ready for this? 3 things. He said, be of good cheer, number 1. Number 2, it is I. Number 3, be not afraid. So here we go. We're going to take those 3 as 3 elements of your remedy. Number 1 is this. We're going to take the last one first. First of all, we're going to deal with do not be afraid. There's that command again. Do not be afraid. What does that tell us? You know what it tells us? What Jesus is telling Peter. Peter, disciples, you're being ruled by fear, but by him giving a command, what he's saying is you have a choice. You can take control of this thing. You don't have to let this thing happen. One of the most important things when it comes to fear, in overcoming fear, is to realize that because when fear comes on, you feel out of control, and you feel like you can't do anything about what's going on. But folks, let me tell you, you can always have control over fear. You have a choice. You have to choose it. I remember in the days when I was having that anxiety, those anxiety attacks, and when I first realized I could control it, and man, this was an enemy in my soul, all it was raw fear. And you know what I began to do? I remember there were days when those anxiety attacks started to come, and I would say this, I would just stop and say, no, I'm not going to have that. You're not going to rule over me. I'm okay. There's nothing to be afraid of. God is with me. He loves me. He's taking care of me. I'm going to be fine, and everything is going to be fine. And you would be amazed at how when I did that simple little thing, that the fear would immediately begin to subside. Not completely. Sometimes I would have to do it many, many times in different ways. But when you understand that no matter what the fear is, you can control it. You have a choice. That's your first step to walking out of the fear. But I will tell you this, you've got to be rigidly dogmatic about it. You cannot play with fear. You cannot treat it as a nice little pet. Well, you know, it goes along for a while until it gets out of control. You've got to be rigid with fear and say, no, I'm not going to allow that to happen. I am not going to allow that fear to rule my life. I'm okay. I remember y'all think it's funny, but one of the greatest statements for me was, I'm okay, and everything's going to be okay. I would say that, and I would think, yeah, because what does fear say to you? Everything's not okay, and everything's not going to be okay, and you're not okay. Isn't that what fear is saying? And I would just rebuke, I would renounce that by saying, no, everything's going to be okay, and I'm okay. And it's like my heart would say, yeah, Rick, you are okay, and everything's going to be okay. Are y'all with me today? Now, so anyway, you can control it. You can control it. Now watch this. How do you control it? Well, you've heard this before, haven't you? You have to face your fears. Face your fears. Everybody say, face your fears. Now watch this. Face your fears. What does that mean? It means don't turn your back to your fears. So many people, when they have fears or anxieties of things in their life, they're all, this ain't going to happen, or that's going to happen, I don't know what's going to happen, or I don't know this, that, the other. You know what they do? They try to deal with the fear by not dealing with it, by avoiding it. They will avoid the fear, try to ignore the fear. Or if it's some specific thing, they will try to avoid the fear by not going around the thing that makes them afraid. Let's say if they're afraid of being in crowds or meeting new people, they'll just avoid that. And they'll think, well, see there, I'm dealing with the fear. You're not dealing with it at all. In fact, one of the important lessons in learning to overcome fear is in facing your fear, you have to, Joyce said this years ago, and I'll tell you, it's one of the most powerful statements. She said, you have to learn to do it afraid. Do it, everybody say, do it afraid. You can't wait till the fear stops. Fear is an enemy in your emotions and in your soul, and you can't control all that, but what you can control is your thoughts and your actions, and you can decide to say, no, I'm going to do this anyway, even though I'm afraid. Y'all out there today? Have you ever heard me tell a story years ago, a few years back, the last time I told it, about me jumping off of a cliff? You ever heard that story? Lift your hand. How many of you have never heard that story? Lift your hand. Oh, I'm so happy for you today. I get to tell it again. Listen. Now listen, this is a powerful story when it comes to this lesson, facing your fears. Now just think about this. I was at Lake of the Ozarks. I was out in a boat with my kids. They were all teenagers. And so they said, Dad, we were riding down the lake. I was driving. They said, hey, Dad, there was a big cliff here, and said, we want to jump off this cliff. I said, sure. So I went over and I anchored not too far away, and I said, go ahead and get out. And they all jumped out, and they turned back, and they said, Dad, you come with us. I said, no, son, my fear of heights thing, I said, I got to stay in the boat. Somebody's got to stay with this boat. And so anyway, no, Dad. And they kept begging me, please, Dad, come. And I said, no, I got to stay with the boat. And then finally they started attacking my manhood. And so I had to get out of the boat. It was either be a wimp or or die. And so I decided I was going to die. I got out of the boat. I followed him. Long story short, I followed him up the cliff. When we got to the top of the cliff, there was a bunch of them. And they, boom, one by one, they started jumping off that cliff. Boom, boom, just like it was nothing. Kids are crazy. Just not a care. I mean, the thing was huge, cliff. Like 45 feet or something, 50. Well, maybe it was 150. I don't know, 200, 300. I think it was at Acapulco I was. That's where I was. No. They're just jumping off, having a great time. They all got down there, and they're all on the boat, and I'm the only one left standing up there, and I'm back here where they can't see me. I didn't even want to see the edge of the cliff. And I heard him, Dad, come here. And so I got closer. Come on, Dad, jump. I got closer, and I got to the edge of the cliff. When I got to the edge of the cliff, I looked over down to the water, which was the worst mistake I ever did. I looked down there, and as soon as I looked down there, all I can say is that literally all of the energy and strength ran out of my legs from top to bottom, back and forth, and my legs became like jelly, and these knees started having fellowship together. Now, wait just a minute. Listen to this. Hold on a second. And so anyway, and I'm up there, and I say, and I'm terrified. Y'all know what fear is like when you're there. Fate's looking at it. But no, I can't do this. And I mean literally, now watch this. The longer I stood up there, the more fear began to overtake me. I learned something. You see, we think by avoiding our fears or ignoring them that they're going to go away. No, they become stronger the more we try to avoid them. And it was getting stronger and stronger and stronger until I got to the edge of that cliff, and I looked over that cliff, and I thought, either I'm going to go and die, or I'm going to go back down the cliff, walk down, and I'm going to be humiliated. And I'd rather be a dead man than a living wimp. So I stood at the edge of that cliff, and I just happened to have a picture. I've never showed these pictures before. Watch this. Look at this picture. This is me standing at the top of the cliff. Can you see me up there? That's what I'm telling you. Look at there. There I am. See, you can see me because you notice all the muscles right here that are bulging out. You see that? I'm standing up there. You have no idea what's going through my mind. And so all I know is I'm there, and I close my eyes, and watch this. With the fear didn't go away. Through the fear, I jumped. Now look at this picture. I jumped. There I am. Look at me. Look at that. Now right there, see that? Right there is a flat, scared man. Look, I'm in midair. Now listen to this. I go and hit the water. When I hit the water, I come back out of the water with my fist pumping out of the water like Rocky or something. Yeah! Yeah! Now listen to this. Did you show that picture of me in the water? Where am I at? They got one of me in the water, I think. All right, well, trust me, I did make it down. Thank you. You can take it off. Now watch this. Listen to this. You know, it's quite interesting, isn't it? That while I was on the cliff trying to avoid facing this, the fear was just getting stronger and eating me alive. When I did it afraid. If you've got a fear of public speaking, you know what you need to do? You need to find yourself a place to get up in front of a few people and talk. If you're afraid of meeting new people, you know what you need to do? You need to get out there and meet new. Come on, you listen to what I'm talking about. If you're afraid of the dark, you know what you need to do? You need to shut yourself up in a room and turn the lights out and start praising Jesus. Or maybe get in a room that's got a rheostat and gradually turn it down low. You know what you need to do? If you're afraid of being alone, you need to go out with you and Jesus and your Bible and a few good inspirational things to read and study, and you need to just find a rediscovery of what it's like to be alone with Jesus, because he never leaves you and never forsakes you. Yeah, y'all listen to me? So anyway, you must do it afraid. Say that one more time. Say, do it afraid. All right, let's go on. Second thing is this. Be of good cheer. Actually, that's the first he mentions, but be of good cheer. Cheer up. What does be of good cheer mean? Now, watch this. Here's why this is a remedy. I love it. Jesus said, be of good cheer. It is I, be not afraid. Here's a remedy to your fear. You've got to take charge. You have a choice. Face your fears. But when he says be of good cheer, what be of good cheer means, if you study it in the Greek, it means change the way you're thinking. Now, here's what it literally means. When you are faced with a fear, then one of the number one things you need to do by faith, besides facing it, is you need to, you ready for this? You need to reframe it. reframe it. Reframe the way you're seeing the thing that you're seeing. Because your fear is coming from seeing it wrong. You need to reframe that, the way you're seeing it. And that's what it means by be of good cheer. Change, study it in the Greek. Change the way you're thinking. The thoughts you're thinking are leading you to fear. You need to turn around the thoughts that you're thinking. Let me give you an example. Let's say someone that's got a fear of sickness or disease, you find a knot or a lump. Maybe it's somewhere in your body. And you find this little thing that comes up, strange little thing. And the thing that fear does, here's what fear does. Fear immediately takes that little lump or knot, and it immediately jumps a bunch of other hurdles and takes it all the way to the worst end. I'm going to die. Y'all with me? It's cancer, and I'm going to die. Isn't that what fear says? Isn't that interesting? Fear never just goes one step. It goes all the way to the end. So what you have to do is you have to reframe the thing. You say something like this. Well, that little knot is interesting. You know what? I'm going to go to the doctor. Fear says that this is probably cancerous. But you know what? I'm going to go to the doctor, and he's going to look at it, and it's probably not. It's probably something that's going to go away in a few days. I've talked about this in the first service. A woman came up to me after the first service laughing, and she said, you won't believe this. At the beginning of the service, before you even preached, she said, I felt on my head, and she said, there was a knot on my head. And immediately fear rushed through my body. I thought, oh no, what's this on my head? It's right here, this growth, this knot on my head. And she said then, after a little bit, she said, you started preaching. And I was all worried. She said, I thought, wait a minute. That's probably nothing. She said, I went to the bathroom, and I looked, and it was a mosquito bite. But what did fear do? Fear took a mosquito bite and took it all the way to the end. So what you have to do is you have to say, you know what, I'm going to the doctor. We'll look at this, and he's probably going to tell me that it's really nothing, and it'll just get better on its own. Well, what if it's not? Well, he'll probably then tell me, well, it's not cancerous. He can just take the thing off real quick just at an office visit. But then, you say, fear says, well, what if that's not true? What if he ends up saying it's cancerous? Then I'm going to die. And then you reframe it, and you say, you know what? Chances are, just think about the chances. Chances are that's not the case at all. If it is cancerous, he's probably going to tell me, but it's all contained. And we're going to be able to take the whole thing out, and then you're going to be fine within a matter of weeks. And then fear says, but what if that ain't the case? What if it's more than that and he can't cut it all out? Well, then you know what? You need to reframe it and say, you know what? Probably, if he can't get it all, he'll probably is going to tell me there's other treatments we can do, radiation or whatever else, and it'll just be a matter of a handful of weeks or months, and you're going to be okay and be on your way. But fear says, what if that ain't true? And what if they can't get it all like that? Well, you know what? You need to reframe it and say, you know what? Probably he's going to tell me we've got a little more radical treatment. It's going to take a little longer. But you know, I think it's going to work, and it'll end up working, and you'll end up living a long life. You say, well, what if that ain't true? What if his radical treatment doesn't work? And what is going to happen? Then you're going to die. Now, listen to me. But you know what's going to happen then? You're going to wake up and you're going to be with Jesus where there's no crying, there's no pain, there's no sorrow, there's no death. You're with Jesus. Everything's going to be peace and joy forevermore. Your struggle here on earth is going to be over. You can't even imagine how beautiful, how wonderful it's going to be. You with me now? So you see, you reframe it. And when you reframe it, it robs the fear of its roots that it holds on to. It releases it in Jesus' name. Y'all get that, huh? The same way with fear of poverty or fear of lack. I won't belabor you with that, but play it out the same way. Fear jumps all the hurdles and tells you you're going to be destitute. Fear says, well, you know, what if I lose my job? What am I going to do? I'll tell you what you're going to do. Reframe it. You know what you're going to do? You're probably going to find another one pretty quick. You say, well, what if that don't happen? Fear says, what if that don't happen? Just reframe it and say, you know what? I'll probably find some odd jobs. Until then, I'm going to be able to make it just fine. That's what I would do if fear came like this to me. I'd say, say, well, what if I lost my job? Well, I'm just going to find another one. Reframe. Well, what if you can't? Well, I'm going to move back in with my mom. What do you think? What if I lose my house? I'll go rent an apartment. You say, yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. Let me tell you something. There are a lot of people who live in apartments that are having just a happy life, having a beautiful life. There are a lot of people living with their moms that are having a better life than their mom is. Are you with me? Do you get the point? You have to rob fear of its stranglehold by reframing that. And I think that's what Jesus was doing when he said, yeah, first don't be afraid, but then he said, you need to be cheerful, which means change the way you're thinking about the situation. The third thing and the last thing is this. Jesus says, it is I. I love this. Are you ready for this? This is so powerful. He said, it is I. Do you know that most of the times in the Old Testament with God and the New Testament with Jesus, that whenever he deals with fear, tells us not to be afraid, that he almost always accompanies it with this statement, I will be with you. I won't leave you. I will never forsake you. You with me? Even to the end of the world. Isn't that powerful? And so Jesus comes here, and one of the key elements he tells me, he says, don't be afraid. And the reason is, as you face your fear, and you change the way you're thinking, you reframe it, he says, know this. It's not you that's going to be able to conquer the fear anyway. It's me in you, and I am with you, and I will never leave you. You see, one of the great things that brings fear in our life is us trying to carry out a life that God's called us to, but carry it out under our own power and our own energy and strength. Like it's got to be me, and you can't do it on your own. It's got to be Christ in you, the hope of glorious living in your life. Jesus said, listen, that's why when Peter got out on the water and he starts thinking, what was he doing? He mistakenly thought that he was going to do on his own what Jesus' word was calling him to do. And then he said, Jesus, save me. And it's like, God, Jesus, I was thinking, I've been waiting for you to ask me that. Since when do you think you can walk on water anyway? Wind or no wind? What's wind got to do with it? Go and fill up your bathtub. See if you can walk on water without any wind. You can't. Jesus said, you can't do this without me. Y'all with me now? That's why in Philippians 4, when he says, be anxious for nothing, the remedy for that is he says, but by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, make your requests known to God. Then the peace of God, the calmness of God, the breath of God's stillness and quietness on your soul will come and remove all fear. Is that beautiful or what? Wow. To live without fear, folks, is the best thing in the world. It's what we're designed for. I'm living proof that you can conquer this. I was plagued for 5 years with severe anxiety attacks, and do you know what? Just a week and a half ago, something like it, 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, that it was 7 year. I'm a 7-year anniversary since God healed me of all that stuff, and I haven't had one in 7 years. Yeah. So let me just say this. When you go out of here today, don't be afraid of anything. Just get rid of your fear about the kids. The kids, are going to hurt themselves, are going to mess up, or what's going to happen. The fear of not being able to provide for them. The fear of your physical health. The fear of not being taken care of in old age. The fear of all of these things. Fear is not constructive at all. It's always destructive when it's not real threats, but perceived threats. Amen? Y'all got something today? Give Jesus a big hand clap in this place.